And we are live for our debut episode of For Whom the Bell Tolls. I want to welcome everybody. I want to especially welcome Tori Tecken, our guest tonight. I want to welcome everybody in chat. And if you happen to be watching later on in replay, I want to welcome you as well. And if you have comments that you think of during the broadcast, or maybe you're seeing it on replay, for sure leave a comment. I can get to Tori pretty quickly if you've got a question that's burning on your mind. But of course, her link is going to be in the description to her channel as well. So thank you for being here, Tori. Thank you for being the debut guest.
Absolutely.
I'm honored to have you here.
I'm honored to be here. I was very excited when you asked me to be the first guest. I feel very special. So thank you.
You absolutely are. And I will warn probably both Tori and everybody who's watching live and on replay, this is the first time I've ever done this. So if you've got comments, I'm going to try to get them up on the screen in a timely manner. I've got some questions that I laid out for Tori. I've never worn headphones in my life, apart from some incidents that I shared with Tori backstage. So I'll be looking a little bit about some questions that I have, and I want to keep this conversational. And I hope everybody's here for a good time, because that's what For Whom the Bell Tolls is going to be about. We just want to have some fun, and it happens to, fall at 7 o'clock at night, our time. It's after work. So hopefully everybody can settle in, and I'm going to say hi to whoever's here right now real quick, and then we'll get to some questions. This guy, who is Tori and why is she the best? I almost finished that comment, but I did not finish it. Tyson wanted to be the first, but Andrew stole it. He does that, of course. Our buddy Darko is here. We love Darko.
I was just watching his Kindred review today.
I saw that
Kindred review, by the way.
I saw that Kindred review. And Darko, I'm telling you, if you come from the heart like you did on that video today, and also everybody, I'm going to be looking at the camera as much as possible, but I'm also trying to look at Tori and look at chat and look at my notes. So if my eyes aren't always focused, but Darko, from me to you, for sure, if you keep your content like that, so sincere and so from the heart, man, your channel's going to explode. That was the most real I've ever seen you. I know that Tori feels the same. So awesome, really awesome video. Uh-oh. He's here to correct my English. although you were an English major too, so you could correct my English if necessary.
I'm definitely not about to correct your English on the level of Dr. Philip Chase, but yes, I was an English major.
Understandable. The bell's going to be tolling for him in a few weeks too. So yeah, we're very excited about that. Andrew 10 would not recommend. Well, that's fair. That's your opinion. We'll take that under advisement. Our buddy Kayla is here. We love her. Quick favorite Hemingway, The Spear That Cuts Through Water. Is that the favorite Hemingway?
Yes, that is the correct answer.
I think that's the correct answer. The Spear, Jimenez.
Evie, my favorite Hemingway is Frankenstein.
Yes, exactly. Which, by the way, I read recently. We could talk about that. Yes. Christopher Navo. Oh, what a wonderful human being. Christopher Navo and Tori were both my team leaders in the readathons that we did on the Keymark Discord that we won and destroyed the competition. I mean, we won. It was very politely. We very politely and casually, and graciously.
It was not a barbaric defeat at all.
We graciously stomped on them all. I mean, as much as you can graceful. Oh, cool. Dr. Phillips says, I look like a cool DJ. Excellent. I like that. Hopefully we've got some 70s FM music I can play. Here's Britton. He uploaded Darko's conversation. Very cool. And got to say hi to Anitha as well, which, by the way, not only did I learn how to pronounce her last name over the weekend, but so did Alan from Library of Alexandria. So, Alan, one of your good friends, you even know how to pronounce her last name. Right, Tori Tecken?
Exactly.
Right. It's Tecken with 2 E's, right?
2 Ks, actually.
2 Ks. Yes. Teekcken. Got it. Okay, perfect. Cool. Yes. Awesome. All right. Oh my gosh. Look, all the way from across the planet. If you happen to be watching this and maybe you're an IRL friend of mine, Derry is coming all the way from New Zealand, which is just amazing. Yeah, very cool. I'm glad she's here. And what do we got? Let me go through this. Here's our buddy Ryan Skeffington. He's a Vikings fan. Brian knows about winning with grace. He also knows about losing and demise and despair, and so does Tori.
Well, I can't consider myself a Vikings fan, but I've been around the culture long enough that yes.
Gotcha. Now let's talk about For Whom the Bell Tolls real quick. Everybody, I know you guys are talking about Metallica, but before it was a Metallica song, it was an Ernest Hemingway book. And before it was a Ernest Hemingway book, it was a piece of a poem out of the 17th century. Somebody was talking about For Whom the Bell Tolls. So I have co-opted this title, copyright Brian Bell, BellTube 2024. Of course, you have to put that on the air. And it not on the air. What am I, a DJ now, Philip? Oh my God, you're already messing with me. Tori, I do have some questions for you, but that somebody in the chat had just asked, what are you reading right now?
I am finishing Priest of Crowns, which is the last book in the War for the Rose Throne by Peter McLean on my Kindle. And then my physical book read right now is Ship of Magic by Robin Hobb. I'm 2 chapters in currently.
Excellent. How are you liking Ship of Magic?
It is, I mean, she starts off with a bang. I don't know what I was expecting in the beginning of this book. It hasn't been what I was expecting so far. And I'm waiting to like really be hooked by a character somewhere in here, because I always feel a little lost in books before I find a character that I can kind of like latch onto. But
yeah, there's no doubt in my mind you're going to find characters on both ends of the spectrum in that book that some you are going to grow to love. And if you read the entirety of The Realm of the Elderlings, which thank God Derry's here in the chat because she knows it's my favorite series of all time. And if any of you haven't seen my top 10 fantasy series of all time, it's in the BellTube catalog. We are still in season 1, of course. But yeah, there's going to be characters that you will love through the whole series, but there are some characters in the Live Ship Traders specifically that you will loathe and despise. Unlike some of the other, any of the other trilogies within that series, but also in all of fantasy literature, she writes very, very good villains. And one of them is entirely compelling. Very shades of everything. You love them in one chapter and absolutely want them eaten by sharks in the next chapter. So
I'm here for it. I'm so ready.
the very famous Elderling sharks, folks. If you haven't heard about the Elderling sharks, it's in her new upcoming series, Sharks of the Elderlings. See, this is nonsense. This is what you're gonna get here, folks. You guys decided to hit the click OK button. This is what you're getting. Okay, so I do have some questions, and we're gonna just kind of roll through them. And I know that you've been on BookTube now for a few years, and if you can, and I know a lot of the folks in the chat already know you, but for those that may be watching on replay, or maybe those who aren't directly chatting, maybe explain a little bit how you got started as a booktuber, and then we're going to talk about some of your books as well tonight.
Sure. I started BookTube over 4 years ago now on January 1st of 2020 because I wanted a outlet to talk about books. It's a very similar story to a lot of people's newbie tags where they say, oh, I just wanted somebody to talk about the books I like. But it's very true because in real life, quote unquote, personal circle, I have very few people who enjoy fantasy and read at the same level that I do. And I also am I'm a social butterfly, like crazy, like a serial social butterfly. So I love talking to people and meeting new people and having conversations and having that immediate common ground of a shared love of fantasy or just books in general, makes that, those conversations start a lot faster, which is very cool to me. So yeah,
that's an interesting thing. And from the associations that you and I have had together, and there's sort of a similar circle of, friends that, we speak regularly. When you first got started, though, it was a little bit of a different area of BookTube, right? Was it more because that's where you wanted to be, or is it more because that's where you thought you needed to be a booktuber?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fairly normal for somebody who's in their late 20s to go through a little bit of an identity crisis. At least it
Sure.
was for me.
Oh, I'm still having one. I mean,
Oh yeah,
absolutely.
I feel like most of my life has been an identity crisis, honestly. So, yeah, I mean, I started by reading. I hadn't really found the adult fantasy crowd yet, and I started by reading a lot of YA fantasy, and there are still some YA books that I love very dearly and would recommend to people in our circle. Um, but I very quickly got disheartened because I felt like there was a certain image that I was not like. I didn't have the red lipstick and the twinkle lights and the
Right.
the kind of cutesy sort of, and I was feeling very disillusioned with, I don't know how to fit in here.
Right.
um, and then I started reading some other adult fantasy novels and slowly kind of merging over into that sphere, our sphere now. And I remember coming across Murphy,
Okay.
Napier, and being like, oh my gosh, here's a young woman who's talking about adult fantasy novels. Cool. Like, and so she was a big inspiration for me to start, really embracing that and not feeling like I had to talk about certain books anymore. And just, yeah, I took a hiatus for mental health and personal reasons between 2021 and 2022. And when I came back, I found Patrick Leo and reconnected with Philip Chase because I'd met him before. And it just, yeah,
It's
that
just
was the end of that.
you found your community. You
I
found the
found my
right
tribe.
neighborhood. Yeah, I mean,
Yep.
you had to move to one place and you moved to another place.
Yeah.
See, the guy I got on the screen right now is entirely responsible for all the nonsense that happens on this channel. So if any of you are out there going, I can't believe this BellTube channel
Blame
exists.
Mike.
There's this channel on YouTube. It's got somewhere about 110,000 subscribers right now. It's a small little deal.
Yeah.
Blame him. Just blame him for everything. Mike has actually graciously, like yourself, accepted my invitation to come on For Whom the Bell Tolls. So it will be tolling for Mike here in a couple of
Mike's
weeks.
awesome.
2 weeks from tonight, we're going to have him on. And I'm very much looking forward to that. But in the meantime, let me ask you a question. When you are, for those of you who may not know, Tori is a brilliant author. And I say this not just because we're friends, because I would tell her, privately she's a brilliant author, but I wouldn't put my own credibility on the line with you guys and try to be, an actual real booktuber if I didn't think she could write, as highly as I do. And I read Phased, which is a supernatural. Do we call it a thriller? What do we?
It's a supernatural urban fantasy.
Supernatural urban fantasy. I read that back in, I want to say, July. And it's really funny, folks, because this is a book that I don't know that I would ever pick up, just not knowing, because it looked like a topic that I didn't, was not maybe necessarily written for me. But I have to tell you, it was incredible. And it turned me on to a whole, set of books and genres that I didn't know I would ever like. So for that, I was really grateful. And then I read The Bloodstones, which is book 1 in the Legend of the Bruhai, which I'm sure we're going to talk about a little bit tonight. And it floored me. I have to tell you guys, the book floored me. It is very high level storytelling, and it's fun when you know somebody who's capable of doing that. We got a guy in the chat, Philip Chase, very similar. Both of their books, you can see Tori's is behind me here, and you can see Philip's Return to Adana's over here. I'm not just shilling for my friends. They are masterful stories. But how do you, in the creative process, try to commingle this kind of double dose of creativity where you're trying to be a booktuber and you're trying to be creative? And I think you're quite good at that. How do you balance that against the creativity necessary to write a story and to put it to paper, from your mind to paper? How do those different creativities synergize within you?
That's first of all, thank you for all the compliments. I feel very awkward now.
Tori, I've been making people feel awkward since the 70s. It's sort of my shtick.
That's your talent.
And by
Well,
the way, I have to quickly say hi to my niece Ellie, because she said blame,
hi.
because she's got the Game of Thrones nun's voice and she's under the weather. So wanted to say hi to
Oh,
her.
feel
Yeah,
better soon. Um, thank you. I really appreciate that. I it is a really tough balance, and especially because, you know, being a YouTuber, as you know, is the equivalent of a fart. I can't talk, part-time job,
it is.
and
And it's sort of a part-time job as well. It
it
could be
can be,
both. Yeah.
for sure. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's a lot, and the editing and filming, even the creative energy that it takes to just sit down in front of a camera and speak coherently about something for 10 to 20 to 30 minutes. Um, so it is a very different creative brain space, I think, than writing, for sure. But they both take up a lot of creative energy. And I mean, I had just posted on my community tab earlier today that I might not be as consistent with my videos in the next, you know, month or two here, because I'm moving back now into writing after Bloodstones came out, and I was in the marketing and launching and everything for that.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm kind of having to reteach myself how to draft a new story after
Right.
all that. And it takes up a lot of creative brain space. So add to that I'm also a wife, a mom. I have, you know, outside obligations in my personal life. And it can be very overwhelming very quickly, honestly. And I think finding that balance and being willing to put the energy where it's most needing to be prioritized is a balance that is sometimes hard to find, but it's really important, which is
Yeah.
why I had to say, okay, I might not be doing 2 videos a week for the next, you know, month or so here while I get back into writing, because I need to make sure that I'm pouring my excess creative energy there, because I am a booktuber and a reviewer, and I love both of those jobs, but I am a writer first.
Right. And
Uh,
I think that that's an important distinction, is
for
that
sure.
you can, you know, you do wear all these hats, but
Mm-hmm.
you know, I have found, you know, that creativity is not unlimited, in that
Mm-hmm.
while you can recharge it, you can refill up that tank, you know, nobody has this overflowing creativity that is nonstop. And
Right.
sometimes, sure, you'll get into kind of like a flow state where really everything you touch turns to gold. But
Yep.
for the most part, we kind of have to pick and choose how we do that. So I completely get what you're talking about in prioritizing the
Mm-hmm.
creativity towards the writing now. And I will say, you know, I bet you when you were thinking about writing a novel, whether it be the Bloodstones, whether it be Phased, whether it be some of your earlier works. For those of you that don't already know, Tori was a published author in her childhood, so this is not her first rodeo. But what I think is her first rodeo, or one of it, is learning the back end of the business and saying, okay, now not only have I written a book, what do I do with it now?
Right.
You know, who's going to read this book? Will they pay me money for this book? How
Mm-hmm.
does a company like Amazon work? These are skill sets that probably weren't a part of your English classes, right? And,
No.
you know, and so that's kind of, you know, very impressive to me about the self-published authors that we're seeing so much of here, because truly salesmanship and marketing and persistence, these are things that really tend to wear a business hat more so than the
Yep.
creative hat. And while there are creative ways of being in business, yeah, that's a whole new thing. So it's very
Yep.
impressive that you've been able to do that. So hats off, beanies off to you there.
Well, yeah, and I think too, like, you know, we talk about creative energy being finite. I think that energy in general is finite, and sometimes, you know, when I was in the middle of marketing and launching the Bloodstones, my creative energy was gone, because my brain space was so involved in, you know, how do I upload things to Amazon, and I'm marketing, and I'm doing cover reveal, and I'm doing these interviews on these different channels, and writing blog posts. And it was so like marketing and business brain focused that I would sit down to write, and there was like nothing there.
Right.
And so it took me a good, you know, I took Christmas off, gave myself basically a month where I was like, I'm not going to write. You just like kind of let Bloodstones coast for a minute just to kind of recharge a little bit. And I would say this last like 3 weeks is the first time since the Bloodstones came out where my creative brain is really starting to get chugging again, which feels amazing because there's always that fear where you're in the middle of it and you're like, it's never coming back.
That's it. You know,
Yep.
that was the whole series in one book. Is there anything that you do specifically that helps kind of recharge you? Is it maybe going outside? Is it, I don't know if I know you're a church going person, so I don't know if that, you know, sense of spirituality and your beliefs help, you know, get some of that creative energy back. What have you found works for you that you think might help, you know, somebody out there that's watching us right now, you know, fill that tank up when you feel like it's running a little bit low?
For me, I think I'm a workaholic.
Okay.
And so
I know what that's all about.
Yeah. So I have a really hard time being at rest. That's something that I've had to teach myself over the years, and learning that when you are creatively burned out and drained, that it is okay and important for you to take a step back to really just let your brain be at rest. Enjoy regular everyday things. I focused on rereading some of my favorite books. I rewatched my favorite TV drama. I reread Red Rising back a few weeks ago.
Very cool.
And just like reconnecting with stories that I'm not writing that really impacted me as a person and really live in my heart and soul. And just rekindling that this is why I love storytelling outside of my own work, you know, that kind of just giving myself that impact again to say, wow, this is why we tell stories, you know?
I think that that's so cool that you're able to recharge the battery with a similar mechanism that, you know, causes the battery to go out in the first place, right? Because I mean, you're talking about writing books, you're talking about creating for BookTube and for YouTube, but yet you can grab like almost like a soul comforting book, you know, like a Red Rising for you that recharges you from, that's a really neat thing. I need to learn to do that a little bit better myself. I've been playing piano forever, since I was like 7 years old, but I have found since I've, you know, embarked on this BookTube journey, my piano playing has absolutely come to a standstill. There's just, I have a brain for creative endeavors, but it tends to get overly focused and not diverted. And I think when people have said, well, you know, geez, your channel kind of blew up a little bit at the beginning here, I suspect it has a little bit to do with the fact that I turned my creative powers 100% towards this. My other business, Amazon, has more control over than I do, you know, on most occasions. Oh, there's Phil. Well, that's a good guy. Timmy. I know who that is. That's an IRL guy talking about actual great DJs. That's excellent. Anyway, so let me ask you another question here. What do you say is kind of like a big misconception that people that watch BookTube have about people that create content for BookTube?
Man, that's a really good question. I don't know. What do you guys assume about YouTubers? I think, well, one of the things that maybe I hear from people a lot is whenever I do deep dives into topics, like I've done, oh gosh, what did I even do recently? Like clean fantasy, and I did one on
love that one. It was a great one.
A couple of different deeper dive topics. I actually find filming very, very difficult. Yeah, and you'll notice there's a lot of edits in my videos, and part of the reason for that is because as somebody with ADD, I struggle with sequential processing. And so for me to have a coherent this, then this, then this, then this is really difficult. And so I have to stop, back up, start over so many times when I'm filming. It takes me a lot of like, okay, I can do this. I'm gearing myself up to film. I'm going to film, and I'm going to go back and do every sentence over that I need to. So I think, like, for me at least, and I know amazed by booktubers who can do an entire video in one take. I
Yeah,
don't know.
that's Mike. I mean,
It's
yeah.
amazing.
Yeah,
It's really
and I
amazing.
think Murphy does that quite a bit too. Although, in all fairness, I have not seen as much of her content. I haven't seen as much of anybody's content as Mike's. But yeah, that is a skill that is very incredible to me. I think that's definitely a misconception that I had, 120 days ago. And by the way, for everybody who's watching, Tori was the very, very first person on YouTube that I told I was even going to do a channel in the first place. And I think I told her back in, I want to say August or September, that I intended to do a channel, but that it was probably going to take place in October or November, because I really wanted to get my arms around how this worked, because I had absolutely zero experience in doing it. And she's super supportive. And that was one of the ways that I was able to get going as early as possible. But yeah, that's a big misconception that I had, was the amount of time it takes from start to finish to put out a creative product that might only be 13 to 15 minutes long. And wow, it's like sometimes I'll sit here and I'll be filming and I won't realize that 40 minutes has gone by on my camera, right? And then I'm sitting back going, well, I don't think anybody wants to watch me drone on and on for 40 minutes. So how do I move this down to 13 minutes, right? Or in some occasions, I'll say, oh my God, there's nothing here. By the time I cut this thing out, this is going to be a short. So I think for me, this is, similar to you, that we underestimated what actually is required to put a video out. And some of the people that we watched, particularly Mike or Murphy, maybe not so much a guy like Daniel Green, because he does so much editing within it. You could tell that, it was scripted in such a certain way, where Mike's is just more conversational. Yet he's able to do these things, boy, we all aspire to that. I've heard everybody. I mean, here's a great comment right here by one of our buddies. If I can do this here. Yeah. 4 hours later, my 10-minute video is completed. Right. And I've seen Patrick talk about, you just put out a 20-minute video and it only took them 10 hours to edit it. Right? So talk about a guy that just blows me away on YouTube is Patrick.
Love Patrick.
For one, he might be, BookTube's most huggable creator, right? I mean, who doesn't want to give Patrick a hug, right? And to me, the fact that he's doing all of this not in his native language is entirely insane to me. That, if you or I, and we both are on Duolingo and we're, attempting to learn different languages. By the way, Duolingo, if you're out there and you're looking for a sponsor, someone who's guaranteed to get you dozens of views. And I'm not kidding when I say dozens. Talking to you, Duolingo, you know where to find me, right here at BeltTube. So one of the things that you do that I absolutely love, and I kind of made a not so hidden request on the Discord the other day, was your vlogging, right? So for those of you that may not know, Tori vlogged the Greenbone Saga. She vlogged, I want to say, the First Law as well. Is that right?
Yep.
And I'm wondering, as somebody who's never vlogged before, and this is something that maybe I'll do. I doubt it. But then again, 6 weeks ago, I said it was going to be at least a year before I did a live stream. So guys, don't believe me. You already know that this is the house of nonsense.
It's in the works.
Guys, I mean, it comes out tomorrow, my first vlog, right? Now, anyway, for you, how does it work? Like, how is the reading experience different versus a vlogging experience? So how do you feel like it would be to have read the Greenbone Saga, for example, because I think that was your most recent, trilogy that you did. How do you feel it impacted your experience overall?
I think vlogging definitely changes the reading experience because it keeps you from the same level of really deep immersion. Like you physically can't immerse in the book as much as you might want to when you're vlogging, because if you read something and you're like, wow, that really impacted me, the first thing you got to do is like, oh, I got to pull out my camera and I got to tell everybody how that impacted me. And, oh, I'm crying, I better get that on camera. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, And I think you have to pick and choose, like, which there are certain series that I would not vlog because I want to just be able to read them and not feel pressured to like have a certain reaction to them or anything like that. I like vlogging. For me personally, I think it's actually easier than doing like a formal book review because it's just a more instinctual reaction to things, which sometimes can get you in trouble
Sure.
because it's your first reaction and people are like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you reacted that way. It's like,
Right.
well, I don't know what
it's what hits you first.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a very, I enjoy that kind of raw, honest reaction to things. And I like being able to share that with the audience so that they can see this isn't me formally having like put all my opinions together. This is just as I'm reading it, very raw, instinctual reactions. And I actually feel like it's easier for me in a vlog to be somewhat coherent about what I'm thinking and feeling because I'm not trying to sequentially process everything the same way I do in a review. So yeah, I enjoy vlogging. I'm actually, I was mostly planning on it already, but you were the one that actually pushed me over the edge to vlog. So I am vlogging Ship of Magic currently.
Okay, Derry, I'm expecting a Hanukkah card this year for getting her to vlog live Ship Traders. That's awesome. I very much
I'm excited.
I very much look forward to that because there are some key moments in those books that I already know those vlogs are going to be fantastic. Do you feel like in a way that you may have to take like less? I don't take notes when I'm going to talk about a book, but do you feel like you have to take less notes maybe because you're going to be talking so often about maybe after each chapter or two than having to go back and remember it?
Yeah, I think it definitely, well, and I actually like it for myself too, because, now at any point I can go back to my vlogs on the Stormlight Archive or First Law or Greenbone and watch my process through them so I can kind of reconnect with how I was. The other thing that I think is that I've noticed about vlogs that is interesting is I think one of the reasons why people enjoy them so much is because it's like that question we always ask in this community. What is the book that if you could go back and reread it for the first time, which book would you pick? Right? Because we all desperately wish we could go back and reread our favorite books for the first time and have that experience. And I think the vlogs of me, I've gotten that comment a lot on the Stormlight Archive vlogs where people are just so enjoying being able to share someone else's experience of reading them again for the first time.
Absolutely. I watch, you and I are both video gamers and I love video games that have great stories. And a lot of the time in my spare time when I'm not watching BookTube, but I am on YouTube, I will watch Let's Plays and playthroughs of some of my favorite story games. And I love it when they're first time playthroughs because I know what's coming. They don't know what's coming. And it's this joy of almost finding it again through somebody else's eyes. But I absolutely get that experience too.
Yeah. I love watching video game playthroughs.
Have you, and I know I'm kind of bouncing back and forth a little between the content that you make for BookTube versus the writing that you do. Have you found that your audience, primarily, I guess I would be on BookTube because book one of the Legend of the Bruhai, you're just now getting feedback on since it came out. But have you found that the interactions that you've had with people that have found your channel, whether it be, through chats or on your Discord, has that influenced your writing at all or your content creation?
For sure. Like in terms of the people I've met influencing oh, absolutely. I have read so many books that I never would have, I wouldn't say never, but probably wouldn't have found. I read Shogun last year because of Alan and also Long Price Quartet. Those were two of my favorite reads last year. Augustus by John Williams. I think my biggest gratitude, honestly, to the community we're in is that they have helped me grow as a reader really immensely, which I appreciate because I think when I first came into BookTube, I had this is what I like. And that hasn't necessarily like that core, what I like hasn't necessarily changed, but I find myself loving and enjoying stories in so many different realms of style and like genre and all sorts of things now. I mean, Long Price Quartet I use as a great example of this. I think 3 to 4 years ago I would have DNF'd it.
Really?
Because it's a completely different style than the like Red Rising where it's action and fast paced and all that kind of stuff. And
do you put that more towards like a reading maturity change or just a reading taste change?
I think more of reading maturity, to be honest.
Okay.
For me personally, I think it's definitely something where my appreciation for different styles of story has changed and grown a lot in the last years because of the people that I know on BookTube who have really encouraged me to dig into every story and not, I don't play a comparison game really anymore. When I go into something like Long Price Quartet, I'm not saying, okay, this better be like X or I'm not going to enjoy it. I really work hard to just let each story have its own space and tell me what it is about without the pressure of it needs to be like this other thing.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I think it's maybe why I like some of the books that other people maybe don't like, because I look at them almost like on a meta level. I'm famous for encouraging people through what's called the slog of the Wheel of Time. Not so much because I think everybody should read the Wheel of Time, because I don't. It's a huge commitment, and if somebody wants to read the Wheel of Time, they should. But understand that if you're going to do it in any type of a reasonable period of time, and say a year or two, you're going to be sacrificing your other TBRs for it. There's just no way. There's too many characters. I think that's a hard series to try to space off over years, because we're talking about hundreds, if not thousands, of named characters. And I'm sure the internet, has plenty of wikis for people who want to catch up. But for the people that the Wheel of Time really is for, and they start complaining about the slog, which is books, 7 through 10, I look at it kind of like on a meta level, we're all trying to go on an adventure, and our adventure is part of the quicksand of the slog. And so kind of at a meta level, that's just the crappy part of the journey that we have to get through, like our heroes who we love have to get through. And I think in some, regard, experiential books like that, like you were talking about, that you may not have picked up 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, are like that. Piranesi is another one like that. And that's a real short book. And that's an experiential book. Some people like me are 5 stars all the way. Some people are 0 stars and say, I didn't like it. I don't like things like that. I felt like I was reading an acid dream. Either way, it's an experience. So,
well, and I think I've gotten to a point now too, where I can read. There are some absolute non-negotiables for me that I will DNF a book over, or I will not enjoy a read because of these things. And I'm also more confident in my taste as a reader, because as I read more widely, I'm like, yep, I know for sure I don't like that. And I know for sure I like this, that kind of thing. But I can still find things in every book that I read that I can say, hey, if you like these things, you will probably like this book. Like, I can appreciate it externally from myself and just saying, I can see where other people might enjoy this because of these factors.
Very cool. You had mentioned a moment ago that everybody has a book that they wish they could go back and read again for the first time. For whatever reason, I don't know what that book is for you.
Oh man. I think there's
one of the books. I'm sure there's probably several, but
for sure. I'd say the 2 that immediately came to mind are Lies of Locke Lamora by Scott Lynch and Morning Star by Pierce Brown. Those are the 2 that I would probably want to reread for the first time.
Because of your enjoyment level, or was it a wow factor, or like, let's dig into that for a second. So what about those books? Because they're really different books. I mean, Lies of Locke Lamora is nothing like Red Rising at all.
I would disagree in terms of style, 100% agree. Okay. In terms of themes and character, I would say there's actually quite a few similarities there, because they both represent themes and character types that I really love. If you look at Locke and then like Severo in Red Rising, you have these very like outcast kind of like acquired taste, but incredibly loyal people who kind of grew up on the wrong side of things, and they're trying to be a hero and not, well, Locke's not really trying to be a hero, but in his own mind, you know.
Right.
The thing I
The
think,
scoundrel archetype.
yes,
A
oh, I
little bit.
love a scoundrel, 100%.
Yeah,
Love
got
them.
it. Got it. Because I think Severo is too, even though
Oh
he
yeah.
was born under very different circumstances than Locke Lamora, right? Where he's a
Yep.
gold essentially right off, as our friend Beard says, right off the rip. He's still very much a scoundrel.
Yes, 100%.
Like Locke Lamora.
I love a anti-hero scoundrel type character who does the right thing despite themselves.
Sure. Well, that's a striking similarity, because
for sure
that is in, but see,
yeah,
folks, this is why I have her on For Whom the Bell Tolls, because she's coming up with these thoughts that we would have literally been here till like June before I came up with that. All right. That's Tori Tecken, folks.
I think with Morningstar, so Severo is my favorite character in fantasy at this point. He has not been dethroned yet.
Okay.
And there's a lot of that I could go on for hours, but I think there's a scene in Morningstar specifically that I'm not going to share spoilers. So for anybody that hasn't read the books, self-sacrifice and loyalty are huge themes for me when I read, and characters that represent those themes are what I love to write. I love to read. And there's a scene in Morningstar that just took my breath away when I read it. And I just I was so impacted by the message of it and the characters that were involved in the scene. And I would love to be able to read that again for the first time. Just because it impacted me so much.
Isn't that crazy how words on a page can absolutely, at your soul level, rip it out or fill you with life or do whatever. And just the workings of the human mind, where you're, reading something with your eyes, or, someone reading in Braille, whatever it is. And we're then digesting these words and changing, putting some kind of an interpretation or meaning to it. And it is just fascinating to me that, look at all these different books. They're all, I don't remember who it is. Somebody had said, and it's somebody very famous. I'm sure somebody in the chat will tell us, but someone said that you live 1,000 lifetimes if you're a reader. And I really do believe that. But absolutely a profound thing that you have there. When you get a spark of an idea in your own reading, in your own writing, or even in your content creation, how do you fan that spark? How do you do that? Like, because I mean, you're famously not very much of a big outline. Or are you? Right. I mean, I think from what I've heard, like, how the Legends of the Bruhai ends.
Yes.
Like, where it's going, but you're taking the Gardner approach of growing the story as it goes. How do you, when you come up with an idea, do you just jot it down somewhere? Do you, record it into your phone? What does Tori do in order for that to either germinate and grow, or to go, nah, that was just an idea that I had, but 3 days later, you're not loving that idea?
I'm pretty chaotic in general. And so my notes and ideas for a story idea are similar. I may have a couple notes on my phone. I may have some scraps of paper laying around the house that have scene or character ideas written on them. I may have like a quick Microsoft Word document with some, like, I'm pretty scattered, which does come back to bite me sometimes. Okay. It's hard to explain, and I'm getting better at articulating it. I'm a very instinctual writer. And so usually I have a character that comes to me first. And then I start building out, okay, who is this person? Who are the people around them? How is what kind of a world would they live in? What is impacting them? And it kind of goes from this central axis of this character or idea and slowly starts expanding from there. So like with Bloodstones, Garen popped into my head when I knew I wanted to go back and explore the origin story of this world that I created. And Garen as this young boy who witnessed an execution, which happens in literally the first pages of the book. So it's not a spoiler.
Yep. That's very cool.
And I was like, okay, who is this?
Yeah.
Okay, who is he? Is he there by himself? Nope, he's there. He's got two brothers. Okay, now we have Zario and Kieran. Okay, well, how does their father feel about? Well, now we have Counselor Hallex, and who's being executed and why? And now we have the traitor, and we have this whole like expansion of the Crown Prince died, and I mean, it just kind of like gets it's very overwhelming.
Let me ask you about that. Let me ask you about that, because when you're writing epic fantasy and you're dealing with different countries and different rulers, and I suspect that this is going to grow as your series grows. And I think that even when you complete this trilogy, you're likely to write more trilogies. So take us through, how do you manage that? Like, is it a spreadsheet? How do you remember who's running what country and who's advisor? Because I think for a lot of us readers, we are in awe of authors who can keep it all straight.
I honestly not really sure. I think a lot of it's in my head, which is a problem. And I'm very grateful for some of my close writer friends who have been encouraging me relentlessly to put it on paper somewhere.
Right.
Because it is because I'm such an instinctual person, it's all in my head and my heart and my soul. And I just kind of like, when I'm ready to write a story, instead of outlining it, I start writing the scene.
Okay.
And if I get to a point where I'm like, nope, that doesn't feel right, I'll delete. I'll start again. We'll try. Okay, well, what if the character did this instead? Or I'm hitting a wall. That usually means I don't know this character as well as I need to, because I'm not sure how they would react or what they would do in this situation. So I need to kind of walk it back and do a little bit of soul searching and figure out what is this character, go back to what is this character trying to accomplish? What are they afraid of? Who is in their way blocking them from what they want to accomplish in the, basic character questions. I do have like a folder with, again, some just kind of scattered notes and drawings and things in it that I go back to. I'm not very good at like, I'm always amazed at authors that have like I have a binder from all of my old stuff when I first created this, but it's not, a lot of it's out of date now, and I would have to kind of redo a lot of it. So part of it for me is, I think I try not to put a ton of energy into things that might change in the next, maybe in 3 chapters, what I outlined isn't even relevant anymore. And then I've spent all that time.
Right.
So I'd rather just be in the story and let the story kind of speak to me on its own. I don't know if that answers your question at all.
Well, it definitely answers, about your process.
Yeah.
I think just like I said, in totality of this story, how an author's mind can keep, some of these casts of characters that just get so expansive to remember, just simply, I mean, forget about like their motivations and the tension points and the plot things that have to happen and all of this. Just the simple organization of it all, to me, is incredible. I think just having read Gardens of the Moon was, a real good example of that for me, to go, okay, now this is interesting because there's dozens, if not more, characters. They all have names. He's keeping them all here. And from what I understand now, book 2, I'm getting an entirely new cast. So, right.
Yep.
It blows me away that authors like yourselves have these abilities.
Well, and Ericsson's just on his own.
He's
level.
on his own planet.
And also, so Ericsson also has a co-creator, Ian S. Lamont.
Okay.
And they designed the world together. And according to Ericsson, when I was talking to him, they have a whole archive of like information about this world and the pantheons and the magic and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
I think that creative collaboration, I don't have a co-creator for this world, but I'm a big talk it out person. So I have a very close knit group of people around me, fellow writers, my husband, my best friend, who I talk through things in this world about with them, you know, and if I get stuck, I'll say, hey, Andrew Meredith, or, you know, whatever, can we just talk about this thing? And I want to talk it out and see if that makes any kind of sense. He might give me a couple of ideas or suggestions, and then I kind of rework it. So there is kind of a collaborative aspect of it for me.
Okay.
It is very difficult for me because, like I mentioned, I'm such a social person.
Mm-hmm.
The minute I've written a paragraph of anything, I want to share it with like 20 people. Like,
Right.
what do you think? What do you think? Can you read this?
Yeah.
You know, and it's really hard for me to, like, the fact that I have the end of Legends of the Bruhai in my head and I can't talk about it to anyone until it's out.
Right. Yeah. It's gotta be driving you crazy.
Awful.
But, you know, that's a good impetus to finish, you know, the series too.
100%.
You know, I mean, I think in some regards, some of the big famous authors out there, they maybe don't know how the series is finishing, because it certainly wouldn't take most people 10 to 12 years if they did know where it was going to write I don't know, 100 pages a year. I think you could do 100 pages a year. I think I'm a big person I talk a lot on the channel about drilling things down and making them into small, manageable tasks.
Yep.
I would think if somebody could write 100 pages a year, in a decade, they've got, you know, 1,000-page book, you're good to go. So I think something must be going on with some of those.
You mentioned too about keeping everything straight. And one of the things that I think people
see, just as quick as I got on her good side. Look at this. Now
she goes.
Now I'm getting New Zealand shade over here. Yeah.
I think people sell themselves short often too, because, for example, like the fact that you ran a nightclub, if you think about all of the different people you knew and all of the different pieces of that you had to keep track of, and ordering and setting things up and different events and managing the employees and knowing the regulars and bringing in the entertainment, like there's a lot of pieces there.
Yeah.
And it's kind of the same thing as an author, because to me, at least, I can't speak for everybody else, but these characters feel like real people to me. So it's literally like my network of friends and everything I know about, you know, you and Patrick and Andrew Meredith and like all of the people in my friend network, and how everybody's connected and all that kind of stuff. It's kind of the same brain space, honestly, for the book. I know how everyone's connected and who they are as people and what matters to them.
So you can really take, in some regard, then, your skills of just networking and life and knowing, you know, well, I mean, it's not everybody, if you know who your friends are, you know who your friends are, but but being able to extrapolate that into the imaginary, which is, okay, these are fictional versions of my network. These are fictional places that, you know, maybe you've never been to. Well, we're talking about New Zealand. Maybe I've not been to New Zealand. I've been to New Zealand as many times as I've been to the country that Garen's from. Right. So in a way, it's still kind of as real to you as a place that you haven't been before, and maybe you never go. You don't 100%. Know.
Yep.
Interesting. I should write a book about that, I think.
You should.
I'm kidding. Speaking of books, so and comments, because I noticed this, somebody else was talking about this on a different channel, but they were talking about criticism. And how does criticism impact you? Because as you mentioned, and for the two of you out there that don't know that I used to be in the nightclub business, and you know, one of the shows that people would always ask about was, is Bar Rescue real? If you've ever seen that show, where they've got the guy that goes in and tells them how they're failing and why they're doing terrible, and miraculously in a half an hour the place is a line a million miles out the door and they're a huge success. It doesn't really work that way. And I think that, you know, one of the things that he always did on that show is he'd look up Yelp reviews, and he would find the worst reviews and tell those owners just the most criticism, all the criticisms and all the, you know, the negativity. How do you, as a creative person, shield yourself to not let that drain you too much more than necessary, because I think if you're selling enough books, there's going to be somebody that hates it. I mean, that's just that. We were talking before we went live today, and I'm a musician, and I promise you, there was one guy that hired me to do a gig that cut me off. I got the hook on the third song. So I mean, it happens, you run into critique. How do you deal with the critique that's maybe not so constructive?
I think part of it is, you do have to have a little bit of a thick skin as a creative in whatever field you're in, because knowing that, just like, a friend of mine might absolutely love the last book of First Law, right? I know so many people that loved The Last Argument of Kings. I got so angry at that book. I was so angry. And I was so upset finishing that book.
I remember that.
I hated the way it ended.
Like I said, folks, I'm a fan, so I watched her vlog. If you haven't watched her vlog and you've read the First Law, I strongly suggest you go back over to ToriTalks and watch that vlog, because it is hilarious. It's a great vlog, but there's some parts in there you will crack up, because you know they're coming, but Tori doesn't.
I'm very honest in my vlogs, because it is an instinctual, not more honest than I am in my reviews, but it's more like, it's not as tempered as it would be if I've had time to kind of simmer down a little bit. But just because it didn't work for me, knowing that there are other people like you and a lot of other people I know that absolutely love this book. Not every book is going to be for every person. And knowing that reading is a very personal experience, that people are coming into it from vastly different, life experiences and reading tastes and what have you. I knew Bloodstones wasn't going to be, or Phased or whatever else, isn't going to be for everyone. There are going to be people that, think it's this, that, or the other thing. They hate it. They give it 1 or 2 stars. That's okay. Because I didn't write it for them. Not to be mean, but I didn't. I wrote it for, first of all, myself, because it was a story that I felt very passionate about telling, and it means a lot to me. And secondly, I read it for the people that it would resonate with. And those are the people that I wrote it for. And I'm not invalidating in any way people who don't enjoy it. That's fine, because I get that. I get not enjoying every book you read.
Do you feel that the corner of BookTube that you were in prior to the one that you're in right now was more, I'm not going to say toxic, but was leaning more towards getting more toxic type of commentary on your content or other people in that space's content, or not so much? I'm asking because I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like I had a pretty good audience even before, for the most part, before I moved over to adult fantasy. I had some really awesome people that we had really great conversations on my channel. It's always when you tap into a particular fandom, sometimes that can be a little dicey.
Yeah, I would imagine. People are very, very strong feeling about certain things. Yes.
And it depends on the fandom. I personally don't consider myself a part of any fandoms, period, because I typically don't like the atmosphere of fandoms as a concept. I just like the books I like personally, and it's fun to find other people that like them.
Yep.
But I don't get fanatical about it ever. If somebody's like, oh my gosh, I hated the first Red Rising book, it was garbage, it was basically the Hunger Games but suckier, I'm like, okay.
Right.
I'm sorry it didn't work for you.
I think that a lot of folks run into where they just aren't familiar with what is the internet, right? I mean, the internet is a very anonymous place where people can say the cruelest of
whatever
things they would never say to anybody ever. Yeah. But and I've taken it and again, I've heard all the criticisms in the world. Oh, look at this. Look at there we go. So this person is writing is just an absolutely fantastic DJ. And so we would throw, whatever parties we were doing. And in the meantime, everybody's off partying downstairs. He's up in my office and we're talking about, the black, he's trying to get me to read the Black Company and I'm trying to get him to read other stuff. So yeah, I don't, where we go. Anyway, but yeah, so I think that having the understanding that the internet is such an anonymous place, and even while you may attract some weirdos, even on some people's that we love, sometimes they have a bad day too.
Oh, absolutely.
Not to say that Dr. Philip Chase has been trolling my comments, sections, but I'm kidding, of course.
Well, I mean, I think it's also unfair, for new authors out there. I'm not going to sugarcoat it and say that when you get a 1-star review of somebody that, really has some things to say about what you wrote.
Right.
Yeah, it does hurt. Like I'm not, made of stone.
Right.
But I think just putting it into perspective, and I always go back and when I have I have imposter syndrome days, I have quit days, and all the time where I'm like, everything I write is garbage. I quit. We all have those days as creatives. And it's on those days, what I always do is I say, you could quit.
Yeah.
You could.
Yeah.
You could stop. You could never write another book in your life. You could close your Goodreads. You could take everything off the market. You could completely never write or be an author again.
Mm-hmm.
And the recoil that I feel, because that's so much a part of who I am. And there's just that ingrained passion in me to tell these stories. I know better. I know I could never do it. And
And I think that the scales of judgment then come up, right? It's like this person's crappy opinion of whatever I did versus me quitting and losing everything that I love the most because I quit. I think it's a really good way to make an effective comparison and a reality check of, hey, this is just someone's in as intelligent of an opinion as it may be. That it's just someone's thoughts. So I think you handle that in, not only a professional way, but in a healthy way. Because there's a lot of people that can act professional, but behind closed doors, they're not handling it in a very healthy way for themselves. And that can manifest in all kinds of behaviors or self-talk or just whatever, relationships, you name it.
I think it's important to have the close inner circle that you can rant to. It is important to be able to go to somebody and say, oh my gosh, I got this review and it really made me upset because of these things. Like, don't go on Twitter and be like, I'm not going to name any names, but this person said copy paste about my books. And oh my gosh, I can't don't do that.
Right. Feed the fire of it.
Right. There's no point to that. And all it does is continue drama and it makes people angry at you and it gives you a bad look. Just don't do that. But it is okay for your inner circle to be somebody that you can go to and say, I had a rough day today because I got this review and it really made me upset because that's okay. Just don't,
Absolutely. And I think that like in typical jobs, people are far more free and carefree about saying, God, my job sucked today. My boss was such an a-hole and blah, blah, blah. More so. And then it's just kind of water off a duck's back and they go about their business, where creatives, because it's coming from your soul. If you're truly a creative, it's a piece of you that you feel like someone has somehow scorned.
Yeah, it's very vulnerable.
It really is. And I think that, the thick skin analogy is a good one. I think, understanding that everybody has a bad day. And I love what you said about the book's not written for everybody in the first place. And the video that I made isn't for everybody in the first place. Look, I've got a guy named Funky Mirage that comes on my channel from time to time throwing disco parties. I am fully aware, by the community's own poll, by you guys' own poll. I'm looking into the camera, you guys. I asked them, I said, hey, you want me to do live streams like me? Do you want me to do them? Have my buddy Funky Mirage come do them? What do you want me to do? And the resounding was, nah, you should probably do them.
Yeah.
And that's good. I like that. It definitely was not the answer that I suspected I was going to get. because I felt like there's so many people on the internet that are more capable interviewers than I am. There are so many people, and again, it gets to the imposter syndrome of it.
For sure.
I don't know if per se I have any imposter syndrome other than a reality of, hey, I haven't done this before.
Right.
And that's what you and I were talking about earlier, saying, and by the way, everybody, I was very appreciative and am appreciative for Tori coming on to be kind of not say a soft guest, but somebody that I'm comfortable enough that I already know as a human being, that if I make a mistake in an interview, it's not, our friendship's not over, or now when I tell you that I've made arrangements for, all of Gene Wolfe's material to be, sent to your house and you'll be force eyeballed to read it, then maybe it'll change. So we talked a little bit about criticism. Let's go to the opposite, and let's talk about, have there been any interactions that you can recall and maybe share with us that you've had, that are memorable to you? It could be either, through some of your published works, or it could be as a content creator, that have been more of like a one-on-one, type of interaction that was meaningful to you in a positive way.
Oh my goodness. How long do we have?
Yeah. Hey, we got, I'm good for another 20, 30 minutes. I know what your timetable is, and these poor folks would much rather listen to you than me. So yeah.
I don't know. There's so many. I mean, I think for me, I am such a character deep writer and reader that whenever any of my books, when somebody reaches out to me and says that one of my characters or the story in general really resonated with them and brought out really strong emotions for them, and that they related to one of my characters in a really impactful way, that's why I do what I do. I mean, the stories, every book I write is kind of a mini therapy session for me in a lot of different ways, because it's how I express and explore my own inner psyche and the world I live in different ways. And I can do that with this beautiful safety barrier, which is fantasy.
Right.
And when I can give that experience to someone else at the same time, and we can kind of make this connection through a story, I just think that that's a really beautiful part of what writing can accomplish, and how it connects us as human beings and builds empathy between people that come from all different kinds of backgrounds. I think when people really, these are kind of vague, but like when people reach out to me and they notice something subtle in one of my books, like, oh, I saw that this, there's a part in Bloodstones, and I had a friend reach out to me when she was reading it, and she said, my favorite character is this character. And it was because of a very simple movement that he does, a very simple action that he does to help another character, to give them a little bit of a boost. And it's like a tiny little one sentence thing in the book. And she reached out to me and she said, he's my favorite character because that one action told me so much about who he is as a person.
Wow. And that's incredible.
Yeah. And that kind of stuff, when people really are willing to just open themselves to the story and really be in it, as a writer, that's just, there's nothing, that's such a high. It's such an awesome feeling to know that you've given somebody else that kind of an immersive experience.
And in that particular case, it almost seems like it was maybe just part of your storytelling, not this, trying to hammer home some point, with a ball peen hammer. I mean, this is something that you just kind of put into the text.
Oh, yeah.
Unbeknownst to you, when it landed on the page, it would have that impact on somebody.
Right. And I think go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I think that's one of the neatest things about the internet, because, the fact that so many authors are directly communicating with their fans, this is a relatively new thing.
Yes.
Prior to probably Twitter, I mean, I don't recall, that many authors on Facebook, certainly not on MySpace. And before that, I probably got some AOL discs, that came in the mail
Yep.
around here. But really before Twitter, I don't think that authors, maybe they had a fan club, you'd write them a letter, maybe you get something back or a signed whatever. Certainly not a direct reply, which is so incredible. And it humanizes authors in a way that I don't think that that's ever happened before. And I don't think it's really happened in other branches of media. Like, it's pretty rare that, famous athletes go out and do that, or famous A-list actors will do that. But I know when I had a reply back and a retweet from Neil Gaiman once, and from Bill Burr, the comedian, was retweeting me, that is just such a cool connection that this digital age has brought to us, that I think it's such a cool time in your author's journey to kind of be where you are in life, to do that. So, just to have that fan connection, just right available.
Yeah, I love it. And like I said before, again, because I'm a social butterfly networker, I love being able to, getting a message from somebody that's reading my book who's like, oh my gosh, I just got to this part and it was just, that makes my whole day. I love that. I love being able to be a part of people's, reading experience of the books that I've written. And I recognize that not all authors want that level of interaction, and that's also totally fine. We're not all built the same.
And I think that's a really valid point, because we sort of live in this Me Too society. And I do feel for some of the authors that are out there that really don't particularly care to interact with their readers, which I totally get. Tom Cruise isn't like calling me up, asking me what I thought of the last Mission Impossible movie. He's going to assume that I liked it. And if I didn't, he doesn't care. And that's it. So I think that that's valid on your side, that not every author is forced into that Me Too just because now, oh shit, now I got to go answer all these fan mails because, Janie Wirtz is out there being awesome on Twitter, and,
love Janie.
She is so cool. She's so cool. I got a book from her in the mail today. I put it online immediately. It's risen right up to the beginnings of my TBR, which is, as we talked about, extraordinarily dense. But I am going to be reading the book that she sent me either in March or in April. For sure. I know she was on your channel as well. But her and I had a really neat conversation about just the differences in where traditionally published authors are sitting now versus where people that are learning the skill sets that you've learned as a self-pub person. There's a lot of people right now. She's out there, talking about her stuff because she gets it. She knows that it's a bit out of her hands in the traditional publishing world, and she could be waiting for 100 years before they move. And, she may have an editor at one of these companies, and then all of a sudden, boom, the company gets acquired. And that editor's job is now redundant. And that editor who loves her work is now gone. And this has got to be happening all over the industry. One of the things that I mentioned, I think it was in one of my first couple of videos that I put up, is that it is a goal of mine to learn more about the publishing industry, because I think, it really hit me when I was reading the 5 Warrior Angels series, because I loved it so much. And for a lot of time on BookTube, there's a lot of people saying, I don't understand why more people aren't reading this book. I don't get why 5 Warrior Angels is the most overlooked epic fantasy going on. And I, as I'm sure most people know, this is a published book by Simon and Schuster,
Saga Press.
Saga Press, right? So they've got their hands on this, and it drove me absolutely crazy to go, why aren't this guy's books in every Barnes and Noble in the country? And if not, how does he get the rights back to his books? I've never talked to the man. I don't know if he would ever even want that, but that has got to be a challenge when you
For
write
sure.
stuff and it goes into other people's hands. And then it's like, if they decide to release it, great. If they, what drives me nuts is when I go into like a Barnes and Noble and I'm about to start a new series and I want to give retailers business and maybe not buy everything online. And all they have is book 4 of the 9 books in the series. And I haven't even read the first 3.
Right.
It's just, it's incredible. I'm getting totally off.
No, I feel that. Well, and I think too, that's one of the reasons why I work very hard to break down the barriers between different modes of publishing, because to me, I don't care how your book got published. It doesn't make any difference to me. I think that authors and readers and reviewers all can support each other and not have all of these divides in between everybody. I think that's unnecessary and unhelpful. And I think that we are in a unique position now, especially with our direct access to our audiences, which goes both ways. Like, yes, it's really cool. And I've benefited from being able to talk to some of my favorite authors. I mean, the fact that I've had Jani and Steve Erickson on my channel, like I couldn't believe that Steve Erickson wrote me an email, like it,
Right.
But on the opposite side is that the audiences are the pulsing heartbeat of our books staying relevant. Like our audiences and getting those books out to people that are passionate about them and who are willing to have conversations about them, who are posting about them on Twitter, having us on for interviews. Like, it's a very mutually beneficial relationship, because without the audiences, our books just kind of
they're a creative outlet where the author can get something off their chest and write it down, but if nobody reads it, then it's just a diary. So there's value, of course, in journaling, but nobody's writing an epic journal full of fantasy. Well, maybe somebody is making a fantasy. You know what? I take that back, ladies and gentlemen. If you're watching this on replay and you are writing a fantasy journal, go for it. Absolutely. That seems like a good idea. So,
I read it.
So yeah, it'd be probably good. Just like chapter 40. Anyway, moving on. So the upcoming projects that you've got.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to take up all of your night tonight, and I appreciate the guests that are here. So we're into book 2 of the Legends of the Bruhai. Can you remind us the timetable from the start of the first book till the execution of I'm finished, this is the final manuscript?
So I started writing Legends of the Bruhai book 1 in June or July of 2022, I think. And I published November 28th of 2023. Okay. So it was about 18 months. Okay. I don't know that Queen's Wolf will take that long. We'll find out.
Yeah. I think in some regard, you've got a chance of not having it take that long, because a lot of the characters, you already know who they are now. And maybe they're going to develop. I'm sure they're going to, I don't see Tori Tecken writing characters.
I don't like static characters.
Right. They're going to grow and they're going to evolve. Yeah. But you've got such a foundation. It's like almost building a house, right? Where you've built the foundation of the house, and that took quite a while. But now all of a sudden you're putting drywall up and doing everything else. And the meat and the bones of it are in place.
Yep.
So we could maybe be looking to a 2025, do you think, maybe?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, in my dream world, I would have Queen's Wolf out at the end of 2024. I think in the indie community, one of the things that sometimes can work against indie authors, I think, is there's this incredible headlong rush and hustle to publish as many books as you can, as quickly as you can. And I think that oftentimes can be actually detrimental to a lot of authors, because I think instead of focusing on getting the book out, focusing on making sure that the book you are putting out is the best version of itself, and it's something that you can look back on and be really proud of the work that you put into it. And I'm not saying that like all people that publish a bunch of books every year aren't, but for me, telling the story the right way is the most important part of this process. And I would much rather, and I know that the people who love this series, who I'm so grateful for all of you that love this series, because that's a big impetus for me to
I love it.
more.
I mean, I'm unabashedly, I am unabashedly a fan, and behind the scenes, some of you know I scream at you guys who haven't read it yet. So yeah.
Yeah, and so that's a big driving force for me too, because I obviously want you guys to know what I know, because it drives me nuts that you don't.
Right. To have the shared experience of it all.
Yeah. And you know, there may be some parts of the next couple of books that I have to go into hiding for a little bit, because the fans may come and try to find me.
That's okay.
But
I mean, what do you suppose George R.R. Martin did after the Red Wedding, right? I mean,
right? Yeah, so I want to make sure that the book that I give you guys lives up to those expectations and builds on the characters that because in book one, I'm trying to get you to fall in love with the characters, right? I'm getting you, okay, here's Sindri, and here's Garen, and here's Zario, and here's, you know, all of the Bruhai, and kind of, we're building a relationship with them in book one. Now in book two, I'm bringing you characters that you already know and love. And I have to build on that. And there's so many threads that I have to tie together and weave, and be careful that I'm not forgetting things. It's a lot.
And that's the organizational part that I was talking about earlier, is that, you know, I don't envy that, but I do know when you had made that nightclub analogy, I do get it, because I remember very clearly, you know, we've had a DJ in the chat tonight. Our bar had 3 rooms, and there was 3 DJs going on, and there was 5 or 6 bartenders and a bunch of bar backs and everything else, plus the customers. So I get that.
Yeah. And so for the second book, I am doing a little bit more organizing than I did for book one. Just because there's so many pieces in play now that I'm trying to make sure I'm not forgetting anything really important. So I have like it's actually right over there. I have a big black poster board with Post-it notes, and I have each POV character at the top. And then I have a different color of Post-it notes going down underneath each of those POVs. That's like, here's major story things for each of these characters in this book, so that I can make sure I'm not losing sight of, here's the major through lines that are important for me to keep sight of. And then I kind of stick smaller Post-it notes with little like detail things off on the sides. And so having it more tactile and visual that way. I'm horrible at like, don't ask me to do an Excel spreadsheet. Don't ask me to put it on like a Google Doc, because I don't like electronic outline organization for books. I hate it. So I need like a bunch of papers on the floor that I can scribble on, or a poster board with Post-it notes,
but it's right in front of you that way too.
Yes.
You know, it's like, it's nice to be able to walk by it and see it, just in case you do have an idea, where if it's locked away in an Excel works, you know, sheet or spreadsheet digitally somewhere, it, in some regard, it can get a little out of sight, out of mind.
Right.
So I love that, having that. Before I continue, because I do have a follow-up, I wanted to just shout out Fantasy Awash popping in to say hello.
Hey, Laura.
For those of you that are not subscribed to Fantasy Awash, do yourself a favor. In the immortal words of one of my heroes, Brian Lee Durfee, if you type in Fantasy Awash into the YouTube search bar and hit enter, her content will magically appear. Go to that channel and click the subscribe button, because I'm telling you, she puts out amazing videos, and look, she's the opposite of me. I'm, you know, going crazy. We got Funky Mirage going on over here. It's a disco nightmare. Fantasy Awash has a well thought out, very organized method to her content creation. It's really good. You're going to learn way more from her than you ever will from me. Both of these women, by the way. Or Tori, you're going to learn from a ton. Fantasy Awash, you're going to learn from a ton, but I am telling you, come here for the nonsense. Go there to learn something. But in what you were saying before, I think that yes, it'll probably take you less time just because the
Mm-hmm.
foundation is built. I also think on this go around, you've got people, not to say in your back pocket, but
Yes.
having just the notion that if you get stuck somewhere, that you can send Janny Wirtz a message and say, hey, I'm a little stuck with something.
Yep.
Could you maybe give me a piece of thought on this or that?
Yep.
I would say that can maybe move things along a little bit
100%.
further. And I
Yep.
also believed, I had a mentor of mine a long time ago tell me that repetition is the mother of skill, and that the more you do something, chances are you're going to get a little bit more efficient at it. You may not get any better at it, but you'll get more efficient at it, right?
Right.
I mean, so yes, folks, expect the same mediocre level content here on BeltTube that you've come to grow and love, but it'll be efficient. So I think that books 2 and then book 3, I would suspect that you're going to encounter that. Just having more aces in your hand than you did starting with, a blank hand, and you get whatever cards that you're drawn.
Yeah.
So that's kind of cool. We're going to kind of get close to wrapping it up, folks, because I promised Tori that we are going to keep it to about 90 minutes or so. And she does have some commitments. Before we go, and if you guys have watched the channel, whether you be here live or whether you're watching on replay, for one, thank you for being here for this, and thank you for supporting me as a new content creator. This is all extraordinarily new to me. Reading is not, but talking about reading to the internet is absolutely new to me. Doing booktube videos is very new to me. Certainly doing live streams. Folks, if you're here, you have seen the de-virginizing. Oh my God, my parents are probably watching this. They just heard that. You're seeing the de-virginizing of my live stream career. So congratulations, or take a bath, whichever you feel most appropriate. But if you've watched the show, you know that at the end of each BeltTube episode, I do a little segment called One for the Road. And I thought on the show For Whom the Bell Tolls, it would be appropriate and a little bit fun and a little bit different, but still in kind of our BeltTube way, to have our guests provide the one for the road. So Tori Tecken, would you please give us a one for the road today that we can leave our guests here in the live chat and anybody who catches us on replay with something to think about as we close out?
Sure. So when you asked me that question, I have 2 fairly short kind of mantras, if you will, that I didn't come up with, but I often think about in my daily life. One of them is, and I think it's very potent for especially the online community, and that is that disagreement does not equal disrespect.
Excellent.
And
Totally agree.
The second one is, it costs nothing to be kind. Everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about.
I wholeheartedly agree. And I think that as you've described them as mantras, that's exactly how they need to be looked at, because a mantra is something that when we were talking about a minute ago, we were talking about repetition being the mother of skill. That's really the core essence of a mantra, is something that you repeat over and over and over until it becomes a part of who you are. Right. And I love the fact that you just talked about be kind to everybody, because you truly don't know what they're going through. Some people are really good at masking it and you would never know. But if that is your mantra, and you put that, in your inner work that you do, that really evolves you as a human being.
Absolutely.
And I think, for us to end on that note tonight, what an amazing one for the road. I just want to thank you, Tori, for coming on tonight. I want to thank everybody who's been in the chat participating. I want to thank everybody who's helped this channel grow. We're only, we're not even 4 months old yet. We're 3.5 months old. We're just getting started here. We've got a lot of guests coming up. I want to say that next Wednesday, just to kind of let you guys know what's happening. Next Wednesday, we're going to be on at 6 p.m. Central Time, which is an hour earlier than we started tonight. And the guest is going to be Bryce from Shelf Centered. He is a really fun dude, and I think him and I are going to have a good time, much like Tori and I did tonight. 2 weeks from tonight, we have this small booktuber named Mike from Mike's Book Reviews. We're going to help him try to grow his channel
Get
a
him
little
some
bit.
subs.
Yeah, we're going to try to get him some subscriptions. We're going to try to get him on, the beauty that is fantasy and science fiction. Maybe we can make a believer in fantasy books out of that gentleman who I'm pretty sure is really only into sports. So we'll find out when we get him on in a couple of weeks. And in 3 weeks from tonight, we've talked about him a couple of times already tonight, we are going to have the author of the Dan trilogy, Dr. Philip Chase himself, where we are going to basically watch him talk and watch me get smarter as the minutes progress. It's going to be in real time, you guys. It's going to be an exciting adventure for everybody. Thank you so much, Tori. Thank you so much, everybody. This has been For Whom the Bell Tolls. I will see you next week. And just remember, if you're out on BookTube, if you're on YouTube, if you're a reader or you're a watcher of the channel, let me know in the comments if this is something you'd like to appear on, because very shortly, the bell may toll for you. Thank you, everybody. We'll talk soon. Have a good night.
Thanks, Brian.